We have George and Kev. Kev's actually from General Electric, not from Process in Colour, but these guys work together on a number of projects. So they're both here today to talk to us about pairing and how it's not just for developers. Again, another 45 minutes, and then we'll be straight into the lightning talks, which will be in the main room, and then it's party time. So I'll hand over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you. So quick about myself. I'm a software craftsmanship mentor at General Electric. I love knowing tech and geeking out on weekends and learning stuff.
Very good. Whereas I'm a freelance business analyst. I'm actually contracted to work at General Electric. I have been since last November. I also do facilitation and coaching and work not just with General Electric but also another company called Diamond Circle over in Australia. So there's lots of things going on. But for the context of this, Kevin and I have been working together since last November. Yeah.
So we were basically starting a pairing experiment within our team, and we sort of had to do a pairing clinic to tell people how to do it properly. And the only reason that happened is because we read the books and we read everything else, and everyone else was like, "Well, I don't really want to do it." So we had some good fun learning some stuff, and hopefully this will come out in some of our presentation slides. So.
Okay, so on the pairing front, who here does paired programming? Do you do it? Who here does it all the time? Cool. And is it just paired programming? Sorry? Is it just paired programming, so two developers working together?
Yeah, but previous jobs we had with other people in teams such as designers, QA, and so on.
Ah, good. Well, you can come join us.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I don't know about that, but keep going.
That's good.
Yeah,
so I also do the developer tester pairing.
Awesome, that's good. Well, we'll come on to that in the context of this. That's really useful. Okay.
So Steve, our boss, he had an idea, well not an idea, but he got fed up with the fact that there was a lot of bottlenecks and a lot of knowledge sharing. We're quite consultant heavy. I think we're 27 in total people, of only which 6 left to use. So there can be a lot of knowledge loss there. So the start of this year we decided to do XP, or to try to do pair programming a lot more. So I spent New Year, this is after 6 months of it being used, this was nice and tidy when I did it. I took the whole office apart and stuck these pairing monitors up, and what we found the best thing for everyone to do is part of what we all call XP programming style for now. We'll come on to what the differences are. Two developers, or two people, at the desk with a keyboard and mouse each, both plugged into the same machine. So there was no shifting and shaking. People could then have their own keyboards, because we know developers get very sentimental about their keyboards. It was quite funny when people actually moving around. When I actually labelled up everyone's keyboard before I moved any of them, so they all got their same keyboard back. They didn't think it was theirs, and you see them all just trying to clean it and shaking the crumbs out. And then when they moved desks, they didn't take it with them anyway and start the whole process. So that's why it started for us. So some of the myths of pairing is that people say it will double the workload. With 2 people doing the work, it won't work well with the right partner. It's only good for training, and the navigator only tends to find the little mistakes, as JB was talking about, the whole semicolon, giving them 15 seconds to find it out and stuff like that. But compilers can do that a lot better. So we found that these are basically myths in what we found. We found we were more productive as a team, and we did. Yes, we did. So our mindset there of we actually got rid of our tester because we didn't have as many bugs anymore. So we got rid of it.
But we liked our tester.
But we liked him. He was great.
Yeah,
We've
he voluntarily left, for the record. We didn't get rid of him. Voluntarily left.
But we didn't replace him, so we got rid of him. So the standard environment that we get is dev and dev. So this is a standard one that you have. You have the driver navigator. Do you understand what the driver navigator concepts are? There's a few people. Okay, to give it a bit more, the way it should work is the driver is the person with the keyboard and mouse. They should never be thinking about the code. It's the navigator that's thinking about the code and thinking the ideas through, because they're just going to be typing it in. To make that work really well, you sort of have, you know, every 5 minutes or 15 minutes you swap over so the other one doesn't get bored, keeps everyone engaged. It works really nicely. We found some different techniques on that and we cover that towards the end. The other one is ping pong. They want to hear the ping pong one, which is basically I'll write a test and then I'll give the keyboard to Georgie and then she'll write the code to make the test pass. And then she'll write the next test and then I'll make the code pass and write the next test and so on and so forth. If you've never done that, it's all great fun, and once you've done it a couple of times, the best bit then, which you shouldn't be doing pairing, but it's a fun one to do as part of a kata, is you're not allowed to talk and go through the code. You're not allowed to put comments and say what you're doing, but I've done this with people before, and it's, you see them write the code for your test and you're thinking, that's not what I was thinking. So then when you get the code back, you fix the code, then you go fix their code, and then hopefully at some point you both get in. That's really good to get nice clean code out. So one of the other ones we taught to use is analyst.
So from my experience of working in different environments, either in IT or outside of IT as a business analyst, when people have paired together, it's ordinarily been because there's been a really big problem. So it's, you work independently or work with your stakeholders and things, and you'll only get together when there's just something that's really massive and you need someone else to talk to. And the way that we've changed that is by actually trying to introduce two analysts at the beginning, because the information that you have is different, your experience of your stakeholders is different, all of like the tacit knowledge you've absorbed from working there for a period of time will feed into the work that you're doing as an analyst in the beginning. Your experience of working with different developers and understanding what kind of content they want improves as well when you're working with analysts that have worked in different teams. So you're going to be upskilling each other. You might have analysts, and we'll talk later about different, like whether you're a novice or an expert, but you've got analysts with different experiences. Some will be new and they'll come with like really beautiful green straight from a course kind of attitudes, and then you'll have those analysts that have been there since the dawn of time and they don't even care anymore, and you get those people mixing together and still sharing knowledge whether they want to or not. So it can be kind of reassessing and confirming. So for this, within the context of our team, at the beginning of say epics or when you are working on stuff and working with stakeholders, trying to introduce two analysts together to get that broader view and does benefit us. And that has been apparent for us at the moment, and not just on the big problems. Where that changed for me was when I had to sit down and pair with a developer, which was interesting. He was my first pair. Officially was Kev, who is very knowledgeable and spiky sometimes, and we had to have big discussions about what pairing was and what pairing meant. And in the initial, honestly, originally I didn't understand my purpose, because this was brought on by management. We had a vague idea of what we were doing, so I was like, well, why am I just sat here watching somebody code? Because all I could do was correct his spelling mistakes at first, and I didn't quite understand what my purpose was. And then I sat down and read the books, which in hindsight is something that I think everyone should have done first.
Yeah, so the book we're talking about is Pair Programming Illuminated. It's quite an old book actually, to be fair. Say old in the Agile world, I guess anything more than 5 years is old. Yeah, it's got some great concepts where we've stolen some of these ideas from, but it's definitely worth reading to get a better feel for it.
At this stage, we were looking at some of the analysis stuff, and the first project we got was kind of predefined by the customer base anyway, so I didn't feel I was adding too much value, and it was quite hard. Having Kev sat there, we've actually worked on, say, acceptance criteria and all those sorts of things together, and built up our Jiras and our tickets and split our features as a developer and analyst. So I wasn't doing it on my own and kind of guessing what the customer wanted. Kev had his input from his perspective as a developer, so we understood what kind of work we were going to deliver and be a bit more realistic. For those that were just here on the in the estimation one, it's really useful to have two people from different contexts working together to actually have a vague idea of how long it'll take. Because me as an analyst, I can go, well, I know a dev team at one point did something similar and it took them a week. So let's say it's a week. Whereas understanding the code base and having that input early means that we could actually have a better idea of how much time the work is going to take, or when we're speaking with the stakeholders.
So then the other side to it is where the dev's leading. So this can be very helpful for where the dev's actually doing the implementation of this feature. So you've got the analyst always asking the questions, and also probably testing on another machine, which is the side-by-side. So again, we'll cover those in a second, the difference between XP and side-by-side. But it makes sure that the dev is actually keeping to the functional requirements that are there, rather than going off on a tangent and creating this feature that they will want in the future, won't they? You know, and it just keeps them both in there. And then the conversations always happening. We can reduce the communication issues of you know, once we've done it and we hand it over to the analyst to test it and come backwards and forwards, this really did help us in the fact of, you know, as soon as Georgie found the test and found an issue with something, we fixed it together, and it helped Georgie understand it for the next problem that we're coming up. So as stories build on top of each other, we actually gave a really good understanding of the underneath of it.
Working at this stage is where it actually started to feel more like Agile for me, because it was iterating it. Because before it was just like short waterfall, where I'm still writing stuff and handing it over to someone. It's just we're doing it in a week, or we're doing it over 2 months, instead of doing it over a period of months. Whereas now it was I was sitting there, and I'm not even just with Kev, but with like other developers. Now they can say, why are we choosing to do this? For what purpose is it? And I can advocate on behalf of the stakeholder group, or go and speak to the customers as we're working on it, and change our requirements there and then, instead of getting to that stage where we're delivering something to them, we're asking them questions. So there's times where I don't know how many analysts there are in the room. The amount of times that I've worked on things and I don't understand the code base, I don't know what the capacity is for things to be developed and changed, and I don't know where necessarily we've got better ways to do things. So sat with the developer, having those conversations during writing of the code meant that we could iterate that a lot quicker and turn around something better for the customers. And a real good benefit here was when I was stuck with the UI guy for a period of time and learnt HTML and CSS to a point where, instead of me spending time building Photoshop mock-ups or balsamic mock-ups, etc., if I'm using an existing app and I need to change something on there, I can now do some basic code changes with hacking on the HTML with a stakeholder, obviously giving them the context, knowing that me playing with it doesn't mean it's done. Just have to allay fears there. But I can now sit there and hack with some of the HTML code and feel like I'm adding more value, because I can hand that over when we're working with the developer and say, well, this is actually what they want it to look like. This is the version that I've saved that they want it to look like. They've seen it with their data in it. They've seen it as the existing app. It's not a conceptual drawing at this stage, because it's an application they're used to, and we're saving time then on developing that. And the UI guy's gone too now, for the record, again, through choice. We didn't force him, but we've not had to replace him at this stage. So it's been quite useful for upskilling other people in the team in some of the developer stuff, but still knowing my place, knowing I am not a developer, and will never write that on my business card.
Yeah, well, you could. So, yeah, so what we're trying to do, it sounds really bad that we're getting rid of people left, right and centre. We're not. It's about making people into generalising specialists and making them into T-shaped people. You know, quite broad, but there's a couple of bits they get up to. So, you know, our UI guy just didn't want to learn back-end development or any SQL or anything like that. So, you know, he generally got bored and moved on. The same for the tester. Luckily, the really good DB guy we've got is still around, and he's learning some real cool stuff as well right now. So that helps. But also, was part of my stuff with Georgie is that she was questioning some of my logic, which was very brave. And we actually came up with more examples and more edge cases that actually made that we delivered a better product to our customer. So, you know, that ongoing thing, rather than you know, how many of you played Jira Tennis? You know, that's one of the best games ever. You know, as someone said I heard someone say the other day that, you know, how many of you have got Jira, like backlogs that are massive in Jira? You know why they're called issues? Because you have issues if you've got a massive backlog like that. But it really did help us just churn through it, and we just took all the effort out, and it made us a lot more productive.
So from a tester perspective, before one of our testers had gone, we could do some pairing with them to understand how they were viewing the system and how they were trying to break it. So one of my favourite things in the world is to break other people's toys, knowing that they can fix it themselves afterwards, which is really useful when it comes to the testing side. But I didn't understand the application when I first started enough that I could go and deliberately find out ways to break it, or understand how that's been done before. Sitting with somebody whose purpose is to go there and try and push what we've developed to its limit was really useful for me. Also to understand the questions I need to ask in the beginning. If I need to go and speak to people as out there in the business that are going to be working with this, I need them to understand what their edge cases are, and I need them to understand the kind of things that we'll be testing for before it gets to them, to make sure that it doesn't break at their stage. So working with the tester there, there's a really big mirror between what an analyst does in the beginning and what a tester looks for and breaks at the end.
And the good thing with the analyst and the tester is it stops the tester doing elephant testing. Yeah, have you heard the term elephant testing? how do you get an elephant into a car? Well, there's only two options. Elephants into a mini, sorry, obviously that's the classic. There's two options. You cut up the elephant and put him in, you've got a dead elephant. Or you take the car apart and put it around the elephant and you've got no car. What that basically means is sometimes the testers go there and they'll do something, they'll spend ages doing it, and then you'll go, no one does that. And then you'll find, and I don't know how many you find, that you get test reports back and you spend the next 90 days fixing this one bug, and then the customer comes and says, I don't care about that. You know, or the analyst comes in and says, we don't care about that. We'll take that as a known issue and we'll work around it. So with the tester being there with the analyst, it helps them actually focus their testing a bit more. And then from a dev point of view, it helps the devs know what the tester's looking for, so that we can sort of agree and understand what we should be catching early on before we even get to the tester. You know, developers always go, I'm too busy, you know, but the tester's got plenty of time. At the end of the day, we're all on agile projects, we're all on tight schedules and the rest of it. No one has that time, and you know, it's quite frustrating for testers, or for testers, when developers just chuck it over the wall and hope for the best, and then it just makes it all bad. So, you know, I've heard of a great story where the guy comes down from up above, you know, management, and starts talking about, yeah, we've made all this money, we've done this, and the QA team's found 1,000 bugs. What? Why is that? Why are we celebrating that? You know, the dev team should be ashamed of 1,000 bugs being found, so we shouldn't be doing that. And this really does help, you know, alleviate that problem, because we can fix the bug straight away. You know, rather than I've seen this in other places as well, that the tester will set up all their test data, find a bug, send it, play Jira tennis, and then go on to the next bug, have to reset all these test data, and that test data can take half a day to set up, say, for example. Whereas in this scenario, as soon as he finds the bug, we fix the bug, he doesn't have to go and reset it, and it's a lot faster.
For context, the tester did look a lot like this a lot of the time. Hence why this is the most accurate portrayal of a Lego person I think I've ever encountered. Even down to Friday dress down day. This is one of the outfits. It was quite remarkable.
There's some outtakes so we can get him very angry.
There are, climbing on tables. On this front, the tester, this is again quite an accurate portrayal of the two testers that are in the office at the time. One of them was very much on exploratory edge testing, understanding the people and trying to break things. The other one was very much on the automated testing and like the kind of computer developer, like code side of it. And getting those two to work together was a beautiful social experiment, because you've never met two people who were more different, and it wasn't sure if it was going to work. But understanding like the kind of, which we'll get to, the habits of successful pairing meant that those two people could work together. They upskilled each other a lot, either on the computer, like on the code side, or on the exploratory testing side. Yeah,
so to clarify that, the guy on the left was also a developer, but he wanted to get into testing, so that really did help on the other side, because he could understand stuff, which worked really well. So you then sort of have to start pairing people up. So once you've got the two disciplines, you may have the difference of the two expert developers sitting together, you know, where they are working on a difficult issue. So as Ron Jeffries says, and I think it's a great quote, when two experts get in sync, you can hear the lightning crack. Working with a good expert partner is like gaining 40 or more IQ points. And it can actually happen, because you start bouncing off each other, especially if you've got that sort of relationship. I know that one of the guys that I work with in the team, I decided to make a stand-up desk one day, and he came over and was asking me questions about an issue that he had, and we actually stood there, and it actually was really good that we actually had a conversation in front of the whole office almost. And within 20 minutes we fixed the issue. And I'd love to have not told anyone we solved it and then sent two other people off, just to see what the difference is in time, because sometimes, you know, 20 minutes of two expert people can outweigh 4 days of someone else doing it. So sometimes getting the right mix depending on the problem.
If you think about a different version, this is probably more accurate. You'll have some people that are kind of average. They know what they're doing, but they might not know the app so well, or they know the app quite well, but they're working in a discipline that they're not used to. So we're talking about some people that have moved from development to testing, or if you move from development to being an analyst and things like that, you might know the application really well, but your knowledge then of the kind of discipline is a bit different. Here, this is a really beneficial way to get some kind of like the standard pieces of work complete, where you've got experts sharing their knowledge with somebody that is a bit more of a novice in that area, or a bit more average in that area, and upskilling them at the same time. So it's kind of quite a common pairing and really useful. And those experts are then reinforcing their knowledge by training somebody else or teaching somebody else all the things that they know, and alleviating some of those pressure points of where all of the knowledge is stored.
So you then get the other side to it of the expert novice. We argued of which one was which on this. So,
well, I think she's smarter. Definitely.
So, but this is really good for someone that's new to the team. They join in, and the expert can sit there and just pick one of these little bugs to do. So, if you, how many of you use Eclipse to do Java stuff? I'm guessing there's a few. I always pronounce this wrong, and I always get told off. Malan or Mylan, which plugs into Jira, gives you a nice little task thing. It really does simplify your life. Actually has an option in it in saying, I'm feeling lazy. You click that and it'll give you the lowest task to pick up and do, which is really good for this type of stuff. So low-level bugs, you know, just to get the novice, get the new person in the team up and running on their own. You're making them drive all the time. The expert should never be driving in that scenario.
On this front, the two people that might be newest to their discipline or newest to the team would be regarded as the novice. This is almost seen as like a trial by fire sometimes, of giving somebody a task and sending two completely new people off, because they're going to ask each other the questions and they're going to feel sometimes braver to go and speak to other members of the team, and they're given the opportunity to go and work on something on their own. And again, this can be in any discipline. So if you've got two analysts that are both new and they've come with different idea sets, it's a good way for them to gain knowledge from each other whilst not working on something that's on production, for instance, or not working on anything that's a bit too terrifying, but it's a good way of them working together and having kind of a period of self-discovery in a bit of a safe environment. You wouldn't recommend it all the time, but especially if you've got new people coming in, so when you've got quite a high turnaround in your team, it's a really good idea to get two people pairing together that are both novices. Oh, it's me again, isn't it? Sorry. This is the extrovert and introvert, so this happens.
No, this did happen.
Okay, this did happen. It's safe to say that I'm a bit of an extrovert, and I was working with a developer who I think had spoken about 7 or 8 words out loud in the 3 years that he's been there. Prior to that, nobody knew about his social life or his nicknames outside of work, put it that way. And about a month of pairing with me on a particular app meant that everybody knew some of his hobbies outside of work, which are quite interesting in that he used to be a goth, for instance, and he had a child named after a character in a sci-fi TV show, and nobody knew that before. But we sat and paired together, and it helped him feel a bit more vocal in talking to some other members of the team, and it helped me to sit down and listen a bit more, because I was working with somebody who was of a very different personality trait to me. Again, we were different disciplines on that, so he hadn't done anything on the analysis side before and would never have spoken to a stakeholder before. He had only ever gone through an analyst or a fellow developer or his management team. By us pairing together on actual work, he was sat doing analysis with me to the point where he felt confident speaking to our stakeholders on our conference calls every week. And these were stakeholders who were international, who were speaking different languages, and it was all quite complicated, but he ended up feeling confident leading on some of those calls. And it made a big difference to how he was kind of reacting with his work, which was good. And I did shut up a little bit.
Yeah, so
sometimes.
So the bit we sort of jumped over there was there's the other thing that sort of fed into this whole experiment, if you like, was, and we're still doing it to today, we've sort of changed it up, was Chris Matz's article around people liquidity. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's basically you have a chart and you rate yourself between 0 and 3 on these different disciplines. And it's all got to be self-driven, and it was quite interesting the first, and then every quarter we roll it out and we say, guys, re-rate yourself, and it's quite interesting seeing some people go up and down, because what they'll do is they'll look at someone else and go, well, I'm not actually as good as them, so when I rated myself the first time, so I think the end of this month when we come to the end of the 3rd quarter, we will hopefully get the real numbers in, and then that's where we're going to start to see some real drive going on. The other thing that we've sort of done is brought in structured learning as well, so that I think I'm doing a couple of things, Georgie's doing a couple of things as well, where we'll actually sit down with each other and teach people real basic stuff. I did an SVN 101. I know SVN's dead to everyone else, but if something works, it's great. And the other issue that I have is the fact of, as I said, hire consultants, it's trying to retrain them all into Git. You know, I use Git SVN myself, so I may phase that in at some point, but a whole lot of tooling around that.
So on that matrix, it wasn't just things such as what's your analysis skills like, or what's your, how well do you play with SQL. It was actually the understanding of applications that we had, because there were certain applications that only ever had enhancements done to them once a year. When the money came through to a customer base, they would say, let's enhance that. And so having an understanding of who actually knew about that means that if you've got to a point where some people are leaving and they're the only ones that have that knowledge, that immediately gives the rest of the team a driver to go and sit and pair with that person on that particular application or on that particular project, just to make sure that we never left without it. Saying that again, if you have unplanned absences and things like that, you don't want to have that one source of knowledge stored in one person. Actually drawing up a grid was really beneficial, I think, for a lot of people to understand not only like where other people are good at something, but where they might be falling behind so they can do their own self-learning if they need to. So for me, I knew that on a SQL basis I didn't know anything at first, and now I can actually write things and play with it for fun at home on my own computer. And that's always quite interesting for me, and it's beneficial at work. And it means that after, say, a quarter, I can see which areas I've worked on and which areas I haven't based on my knowledge, and it gives the management team some kind of idea of where to support their team and where to build in structured learning.
Yeah, so you also get the fact that you can look at that sheet because it's public. We don't want to share it. We want to be as open to each other as possible. But if you've got an issue, you can probably go to that sheet and find who's the expert in that area and go and ask them. So it does share the knowledge a lot, and sometimes it may be that, I've got quite clever at doing this now, is that I'll look at it and go, well, I've got the 3, but I know someone who's got the 2, so when someone comes to me to ask a question, I actually point them to the next person, because I find the best way to learn is to teach. So, they can then teach them, and then if they do then have questions, then the 2 of them then come to me, then we change it even more. So you almost get to 3 people there, but that's going to be a lot more beneficial, and you learn a lot more from discussion, I found. So, we've talked about side-by-side and XP. So, XP style program is 1 computer, 2 keyboards, 2 mice, 2 people. Side-by-side is a bit different, where you actually sit closer to each other. Rather than in pods, you actually sit right next to each other. And one person can be typing away and coding up, and the other person can be Googling something or testing it in real time or doing something like that, and actually having that conversation the whole time. Rather than be at 2 different ends of the office or on a wide desk, actually get nice and comfy and nice and close together and do stuff like that. So there was a study done in the States, and they sort of indicate that side-by-side programming is very interesting alternative to XP. What they found is that the time to get stuff done using side-by-side was 60% of the time it took it to do it solo, and and people found it was less effort to do side by side, because when you're doing XP and you're working together, it's quite exhausting because you've got a number of factors. You've got personal things to remember, you've got your own errands you want to go and run, and you've got to sort of just pair together. And it can be quite hard. But out of this study, they found that people preferred pairing, either side by side or XP, over working singular, working on their own. And they also found that there was like a 60% increase in productivity. They were churning out more stuff because you weren't having that communication stuff. But they found that that XP programming took 50% more effort than side by side, and 100% more effort than solo, which you would expect.
When we originally introduced this, it was kind of forced on us, and so it was difficult at first. In that we had we were kind of almost told that you had to pair a good 70% of the time. So there was core hours were introduced, I think, for the first time ever. So there was actual designated hours. You'd expect your colleagues to be in the office, and the expectation was that you would be sat with someone and pairing on something for those core hours. Outside of those hours, you would be going and doing your extra stuff. If you're doing some learning or training or anything like that, you might do that outside of those hours. And originally, we were forcing people to do that. The study had shown that it was probably best to have like a 70% side-by-side pairing, and then 30% maybe paired pairing. We started off in the opposite way to kind of ingrain it in people, so they got used to the fact that this is how we were going to work. And the natural progression has been that when people have felt more confident and comfortable, sat with working with someone on a strict pairing front, they've naturally progressed to doing a lot more side-by-side pairing. And it now has started to look like the way that they want you to look like, in that we've got about 70% of side-by-side pairing where you are sat with someone having those conversations, and then 30% of the time-ish you are doing solid paired programming, and that's been a natural progression. It was forced at first, and there was resistance. But that's just being the way it's developed. Yeah, it was futile, but we got there because the management hold the money. So
yeah, well, it's also the fact that when management come up with the idea, and management that's a bit clued up compared to some management teams that I've worked with, understand J curves. So we were given 3 months, knowing that we were going to slow down. I think in the end we were given closer to 4 months, but we've seen the uptake of it. We've seen the share of knowledge. So we're in a special position where it comes from management. And I know a lot of the question is going to be, well, how do I get it to go the other way? We'll cover that towards the end if we have time. But one of the latest things that I sort of suggested in the office one day was the mob programming by Woody Zill. And his basic thing is it's all the brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time in the same space on the same computer like a real mob. So Woody's thing was basically they inherited a project and they all got into a meeting room and they all started talking about it on the big screen, and they found it worked really well. Then they got kicked out of the meeting room, so they found another meeting room. And then over time they actually made it that the team itself grew into this. So what actually happens here is you have one person, you have the driver there that's on the keyboard, and you've got everyone else is the navigator, and sometimes a stakeholder may come in and interject and see what the guys are really, how much fun the guys are having getting this stuff done for them. This again was one of the things they found is that by just trial and error, there's now, I think they have 4 keyboards in there, 4 different keyboards, so depending which keyboard you prefer, the Microsoft one, the Logitech one, the Cherry key with the bouncing keys, or the inverted one, or whatever you want, you just take over the keyboard that you want. They've got it, when they first started doing this, I think they were churning the driver every 4 minutes. It's now up to about 15 minutes. So when someone new starts, 4 minutes of the keyboard while other people talk about stuff. And someone asked them for their stats on it, and he couldn't really work out how to do decent stats because they couldn't really keep them. But what they did was, what did we deliver last year to what we delivered this year? And he said they delivered 10 times more things. And the reasons for that is some of the productivity destroyers are removed. The communication problems are gone because you're always talking. So when they're on a conference call, it's answered as the development team. Now in that team, that can be the DBA, it can be the dev, that can be the analyst, it can be the coach, there can be everyone in there that needs to be there, the right people in the right place at the right time. This is decision making. Sometimes people sit there and try to make it, and again we play email ping pong and the rest of it. The decision is made in that room and we move on. You do more than barely sufficient. It stops all the crashing backwards and forwards. Politics is always a good one. We all have to deal with politics. And there's so many other things that this actually solves for us. So introducing this, I think actually the first one we did was a merge. As everyone knows, doing SVM merges, which is why people have moved away, are always fun. And so I've got 3 people in the office. It was apparent why this merge was going wrong, because the guy was doing it wrong, totally. He was almost doing it manually. It was like, oh, okay. But that was a learning curve, and he learned a new way of doing it, and it made everyone else happy, but everyone else had their input. It worked really well. And then recently, Georgie had been working on a problem to get that out. I think you had 5 people in that room.
Yeah, we had a developer working with me as an analyst, and this is an example of when it can go wrong. A solo developer doing all the programming, and so he wasn't, because of the changing in team, he wasn't given the opportunity to pair with another developer a lot of the time. So I could sit there and support him and do side-by-side work as far as representing the stakeholder, but it got to the point where the work, the problems kept mounting up with this particular piece of work. So we naturally just said, let's book out the meeting room, and just got 5 people in the meeting room. So what had taken a month or so of worrying about and stressing and pushing back with more and more issues, ended up being 2.5 days of 4 people in a room together, just getting it done. And then it ended up that in the morning I could come in and test the things that we'd done the day before, and there weren't any bugs, which was awesome. But it meant that we also drew in customers and said, okay, we're going to steal your time for 45 minutes-ish. So brought them in, sat them down, said, these were all our questions. Is this what you meant? Is this what you meant? And got those answered there and then. And it was one of the most productive few days that I actually felt really positive and worthwhile being there for a long time. And it was actually really beneficial, and I would highly recommend it, but not just for the problems, because this had turned into one of those.
This was a problem-solving exercise rather than actually getting together. So we've apparently yesterday I overheard that we've got the funding for a new project, and the lead analyst on that has basically said, I'm having that corner of the room and I'm turning that into a mobbing area. He's never developed in his life, but he absolutely loves the idea and he knows that it's going to work. Mainly because I've bought him lunch a few times. And,
bribery.
And I bribe people like that sometimes. So. The other thing that's also interesting with the way that when he talks about it is that every morning they'll sit there for half an hour to an hour and go, what didn't we do so well yesterday and what can we learn on? So maybe we didn't do TDD so well, or maybe we didn't do BDD so well, or something didn't go so well that we wanted to do, or we didn't think it was great. So some coding techniques, testing, analysis techniques. So 36 minutes in the morning, that's the first thing you do. I originally heard this at Socrates, the Software Craftsmanship and Testing Retreat, back in June, and the guy from Ericsson was there, and this is why I'll go on about the keyboards, because he has a really crinky he actually brought it with him because it's the only thing he can type on. And he says their whole team, there's 6 of them in a room every day, and they all get in at 8 o'clock, they all leave at the same time, they all go for lunch together, they all do everything, they say it's like a family. And that really does help with a lot of stuff as well, which is great.
There are tips and tricks to working with people, so I know that some of these have been mentioned before. Some of them are common sense, you think, until you sit down and work with someone and get frustrated, and then you kind of forget them. So letting the driver make a few, give them a little bit of time before you correct them on things like spelling mistakes and stuff like that. People work differently. One of the things that we talked about when we were working together was actually outlined how we work as people. It's quite a nice little self-discovery of saying, well, I quite like to be really reactive and I like to fix things as I go. Kev likes to run to the end, then think about it, go and correct everything, and then talk about it. So we had different ways of working. It was understanding that. So I wasn't being ignored. It was just the best way for him to work.
Yeah. So for me to teach Georgie some stuff, it will be like, well, let me get through my thought process, because as a developer, sometimes we just want to focus and just go, right, let me do my thought process. You sit there, shut up, be quiet, go and make tea or something. Right, bang. Right, come back, and then step through every line of code and explain it back. That had 2 things on it. That was I could get down and do what I do best as a solo developer, because that's how most developers work. But also, Georgie then got to learn stuff. But at the same time, the other part of it is then I got to see my mistakes, or this is where we would challenge our logic, which worked really well for me and for Georgie, because she didn't feel she was being ignored. Her input was there. It's like, oh, so if I get this right, you mean this is what it's going to do? Yes. Well, that shouldn't do that. Why not? Okay, and then have the discussion, and that was real good fun for us.
We were talking scenarios right there and then to make sure that what we delivered is actually what we expect, which was really beneficial. Yeah. If your partner's getting bored or falling asleep, like say it's this time of the day, pass them the keyboard to get them in. So you don't have to be strict on saying, well, every 15 minutes or every hour I'm going to go and swap the keyboard around. It's just have that conversation about why aren't you currently engaged in this piece of work? Do you want to do the typing for a bit? Which is quite difficult to do if you're quite protective over the piece of code that you're working on, or on the Jira that you're developing at the moment. But passing that over to someone can actually change the way that you're thinking about the work you're doing as well, and keeps them engaged.
So on the flip side, again, if you see the other person get frustrated, ask to take the keyboard off them.
That used to say grab the keyboard, but then people protested because you really shouldn't steal from others, which is fair.
So some of the other things we found as well is actually having that conversation, as we said, up front, and make sure we can work together, which is conscious of time and jumping over some stuff. Yep. So
this is you.
This is me now. Okay, fair enough. So practice active listening. Obviously, when we practice this, I didn't listen to that fact. This is my slide. Talk a lot. Constantly talking is really good, because you'll come up with ideas. How many of you had the concept of the nodding dog or nodding duck or whatever they're called? And you've got a little duck on your
Rubber duck.
There's the rubber
duck.
duck.
Yeah. The teddy bears don't nod.
No, but one of the universities had a teddy bear sat outside the professor's room, and you weren't allowed to go in until you spoke to the teddy bear. And they used to check. There you go.
So I've done it in the past. I went out and bought everyone a Churchill nodding dog because I thought they looked better than ducks. But yeah, I still see it now when you get a developer go, oh yeah, so when I do, no, I've got it, thanks, that's just taken me out of my zone for whatever. Just ask. If you don't understand something, what they're doing, just stop and ask. It's perfectly acceptable. Again, because you've had those agreements, it could be stop and ask at the end of whatever. There will be conflicts on design, direction, techniques between the partners, especially if we've got 2 ego developers or expert developers with their egos, and they'll start arguing, and we've seen that in a few places, and you need a referee. But generally, sometimes conflict is good because you're going to come out with a better design, because it may be half of each to do that.
These are valuable when working with somebody for periods of time in warm offices. On the breaks front, when you start working with someone, you don't know what their schedule is. Some people have to nip out to the loo, or they have to make cups of tea every 25 minutes, which when you're sat working alone you don't think about, but suddenly when you're sat and there's somebody working with you, you are unbelievably self-conscious about how many times you might have to go and make a cup of tea in the daytime. One of the things we introduced in some of the, with some of our pairings and people use every so often is things like the Pomodoro. So has anyone used the Pomodoro before? So that's the little tomato timer, 25 minutes, where you've got a specific task in mind, working with somebody. On top of the fact that it helps you get a piece of work done, one of the benefits is knowing that you have a designated amount of time when you can both leave your desk, walk away, think about something, or go and take comfort breaks, or go and make that phone call you need to, and then return.
Yeah, so me and Georgie again introduced this for our own team, and on the whiteboard behind us we had a, if you want to talk to us, put your name up. And that worked really well for us. So rather than interrupt us, they give us the name. So we'll find their name, we'll go over to them and ask them if they want it. I can't remember. Right, when you put your name up there, can you put a note on there of what you want to talk about? That'd be great. So we did that, and that worked really well. And then someone else started doing poems. So they came over, they see that we were in a poem, put their name up, wrote on it. There's a theme coming. And then we were finished, and we went over to them, and they were in a poem. So we had to put our name in. So we started playing pom.
Pom, ping pong.
Pom, yeah. So then we had an agreement between us that if you come to us and you write your name down, we're allowed to break your pom, because you've come to us. And that worked really well for the number of people that did come up and do that. And it got everyone into a rhythm, because nothing is, unless you work in a hospital, I guess, most things can wait 25 minutes. Unless you're really dying to go to the loo, obviously, go. So our conclusion from a lot of this stuff is that pairing in any style, be it side-by-side, XP or mobile, mobile programming, yeah, you can do that as well, works really well. Doesn't matter which one you use. It'll benefit any team, and the rewards are almost instant, we've found, some of the feedback stuff.
Even with working with international teams, using screen share and like teleconference stuff and actually working together still works in a pairing environment. And some people will sit and they'll be doing side by side all day on a conference call. So they'll have these conversations there and then because they know that their team member is in another part of the country or another part of the world. But they can still operate in this way, so no one's left feeling like they're completely working on their own, even if you're working with international teams.
Yeah, so some of our findings is don't force it. Although we did get it forced on us, we feel that it would have been a lot easier a ride if we didn't. But on the other side to it, that by actually forcing it and coming from management, it worked really well. So again, a lot of people are saying we're not going to be able to do that. At the end of the day, management don't tend to care so much, as long as you are delivering the value that you promised to do. So if you just start pairing and you enjoy it and you're happier, isn't that good for you? And isn't that good for your other teamates that find that as well? And then it can grow by osmosis.
And then again, agreeing positive working spaces and practices, planning those breaks, and then operating in virtual pairs is all going to be a benefit to you.
Yeah, so virtual pairing was quite interesting in that for Eclipse, again, there's a plugin called Saros, and that would allow 5 of you to get into the same session and share the same project, and each of you can have a cursor. So even sitting next to each other, and again going on about what JB was talking about, as soon as you see someone miss a semicolon, rather than say it to them, your cursor was totally separate to them, so you can go and fix it for them before they even notice. And that's really cool. And again, on the phone, you're just doing it, it's all in real time. It allowed us to do that.
What's that plugin called?
Saros, S-A-R-O-S. Really nice, really cool. And then sit on Skype and do whatever. It actually does have a few other bits in it. One of the other funny things that we found with it is that we had a recent happiness survey. So my boss, or our boss, sends out a happiness survey every quarter. And in the most recent one, 50% of people said we were doing too much pairing. 50% said we weren't doing enough pairing. So we've got to be doing it right. So the fact we got the both sides of it meant this actually did work for us really well.
It's empowering the team now. Now that we've all done it, you can kind of pick and choose a little bit more about when you find it's most applicable. So if you do find that you only work in a mob when you're solving a really difficult problem, go and do it. And if you find that you actually prefer working on your own and just doing a bit more side by side, then people are empowered more to do that. And it has resulted in there being less bugs in our code, better code reviews. One of the testers left, and we haven't needed to bring in another because what we're delivering and sending out is better than we were doing before. So it's been, like, for the actual work we're delivering, it has been a massive benefit just getting all of these people working together.
And I think when the guys started doing mobbing a lot more, one of the guys felt a bit left out. So it works for everyone. So, when everything is awesome, especially cool when you're part of a team. So you can see we almost got that bang on. We didn't spend too much time on that. So 5 minutes at the end of the other day.
Cool. Any questions?
So you mentioned that you ran this as an experiment and you said that it made you more productive. How did you measure that? And you kind of mentioned it produced less bugs. Was that the only metric that you used to validate that experiment?
One of them was about looking at the quality of what we were delivering at the end, like that kind of output, but there was also, the manager did understand the J-curve of us being slower for a bit, but the work that we're doing now is generally quicker. We use Kanban, don't we? So it's
so it's got people into more thinking, where you'll get a developer think they have to do a big chunk of work, we've got more, because the other people that know to do smaller chunks. So we're releasing the value quicker to our customer. So we're finding we're doing more often releases. Every time we do a monthly release, it's got more in it. Is another way we found to do it, rather than a release every month that has little fixes, and then one big one and then one.
And it's smaller team now than it was when we started, and we are still delivering a higher output. We're releasing a higher output.
This is more.
Yeah.
Not so much a question, is kind of sharing something around, you talked around conflict. Is that a team of about 10 at 9TV and did full-time pairing, so five pairs. They would rotate pairs every half a day, so they would constantly switch in to different pieces of work for the kind of knowledge share stuff we talked about. But when they got into points where there was conflict, they would call, one of the pair would call a timeout, which would stop the entire team dead, and the team would have to decide on what the conflict was, and what the correct way forward would be for them.
Did anyone get angry at the context switching, or did they understand the benefit as a team at that point?
Occasionally you might get a little bit of frustration now and again when somebody is really keen to stay on something.
But that's very Toyota process, isn't it? It's like stop, everyone stop, get it done, and that just speeds everyone up, as you say, because that decision there by those two people will affect these two.
And they realise that really quickly. But in terms of what you were saying about the swap at the halfway point, at the half-day point, you would get a bit of sort of reluctance.
Yeah, we didn't really
keen on doing that. I really wanted to see the end of it.
Yeah, we didn't really touch on that so much, but yeah, we did. At the start, we made the change quite often, and then it did get a bit stale, which we've now found issues because two people are stuck on it, and they're tunnel focused, and it's very much what Jody was saying earlier.
As the level of maturity grew, then with them, they they understood why they moved on to something else. They understood that was a good thing for them, and a good thing for the rest of the team, and a good thing for what we were trying to do in terms of add value.
That's good. I like that approach actually. It's really useful. Thank you.
One thing I noticed that one benefit of pairing is also that if you, for example, 20 days later, you discover there was an issue with a particular commit. On every commit message, we had the pair that paired on that commit. So you have two people that worked on it. So if one is away, you have two people you can try.
We have a commit message. Yeah, we have a commit standard that is Jira number, initials, Jira title, and then the rest of it.
And sometimes those initials are 3 or 4 people as well. It's not just 2.
But Maven for Eclipse actually can do that for you. So if you say I'm working on this Jira, when you do the commit message, it's already pre-filled it all for you, other than the people. Obviously, it doesn't like that. That's really useful. And other thing to then, sorry, just cover on that one is the initials are quite fun because there's 3 of us with the same initials.
Yeah.
So you've got to, I think one person ended up being GB2 and you've got to be upset. So
yeah, we have GM, GM and GM, which doesn't help anyone. So we have to.
Actually, no, we've got quite a few now.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
The question I had was, for example, we have quite strong and really different personalities at work, and what I was wondering, can it sometimes be beneficial to let some people pair more because their pairing style is a better fit? So
that's what we found is
I don't like being forced pairing with a person that
no, because obviously you need to work out who works well together and who doesn't, and you're never going to get over some personal things. The tester scenario there is the guy that was sort of more of a developer stroke tester. He didn't like pairing at all, so we had to be very careful about how we dealt with that. And we gave them the option to have more time out or make their 30-minute breaks or 10-minute turnovers, so they actually built it around themselves to make him feel comfortable.
And he now requests to pair with people instead. So he'll say, I'm available, can I pair with you? Oh, I want to understand that. I'm going to go and pair with you for half a day, which is a big shift in where his personality was. But he's now seen that because pairing was forced on him and he instantly reacted, and now he's got used to doing it and working with people, he's now seeing his own benefit too, so he's requesting it, which has been a nice shift that he's come to it.
What we found with our half-day swapping in answer to Irish point is that it allowed the team to make a choice of where they were going to next.
Yeah.
So there was kind of a negotiation about who you would go and pair with next. So, there's a little bit of favourites playing in there, but it could also mean you avoid people that you know you're going to have a
it's the self-organising stuff. It's also making sure that your stories are small enough so that they can be half-hour turnovers. And the other thing what we sort of did at the very early stages, or actually before we even started this, is a pairing ladder. And a grid of how many times and like a little tally chart. And then you can go in and go, well, hold on, they've never paired. Really they should. Find out why didn't.
I'm quite conscious of time. We are going to both be at the party thing later if you guys are.
And if anyone remembers top trumps, we've got some top trumps with these guys on it. We've only got a few, so whoever comes up first to get them.
This is showing the upskilling of our team when it comes to after pairing, when we've been able to learn more about front end, back end, databases, etc. So if you'd like to take some top trumps away, you are welcome to.